The sun dipped low over Hangman's Hollow, casting its last rays on a town that wore shadows like a shroud. Dust swirled in the wind, curling around crumbling wooden buildings that loomed against the evening sky, their paint peeling like old memories. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and despair, a testament to countless confrontations and a dark history embedded in the very ground where lawlessness thrived. Hangman's Hollow was a border town where desperation reigned, and justice was enforced with little more than a fraying rope and a noose that seemed to have a life of its own. No one spoke openly of the marshal, Vernon Pike, the man who could end a life without a second thought. Murmurs filled the saloons, warnings passed through clenched teeth. For many, the mere mention of his name was enough to silence even the bravest heart. His reputation was that of an iron-fisted relic from another time, ruling over his dominion with unyielding cruelty. The townsfolk moved like ghosts, avoiding each other's eyes as they navigated their daily lives under Pike's grim watch. They were prisoners in their own homes, shackled by fear of the gallows that declared justice in ways the law no longer recognized. Those who wore the badge showed their loyalty not to the law but to survival, aligning with Pike's twisted sense of order. Then came Jesse Cole, a young gunslinger on a quest bathed in uncertainty and hope. His entrance into town echoed softly against the hollow streets. It bespoke of change, fearless and determined. His father's old revolver hung low on his hip, heavy not just with metal but with expectation. Jesse sought not revenge but truth, stirred by the mystery surrounding his missing brother and haunted by the fate he had uncovered. The ledger tucked within his pocket held the names of those who had met their end too soon, victims of a merciless system henpecked by a single man's ambition. As the last light faded behind the jagged mountains on the horizon, Jesse took his first step into the heart of darkness, ready to unveil the secrets that had long shackled Hangman's Hollow in chains of silence. The echoes of his brother's name lingered in the air like a faded whisper. Today would mark the beginning of an unraveling thread that could change everything. Marshal Vernon Pike stood as a formidable figure against the backdrop of Hangman's Hollow, his presence as suffocating as the dust that hung in the air. With a tall, imposing frame and a face carved from stone, he embodied an era that was quickly fading but stubbornly refusing to disappear. His gray eyes, cold and calculating, held no warmth for those who crossed his path. Instead, they were windows to the soul of a man who thrived on power and control. Pike's reputation was built on a foundation of brutality. He had earned his title through acts that sent ripples of fear throughout the town, a noose always at the ready, waiting for those he deemed guilty or simply inconvenient. Many had disappeared from the streets without so much as a trial, their fates sealed by his word alone. The townsfolk spoke of him in hushed tones, stories woven with threads of terror. It was said that he could pull the lever on the gallows with a flick of his wrist, delivering death like a swift breeze to anyone who dared challenge him. Each morning when dawn broke over Hangman's Hollow, Pike could be seen patrolling the streets like a hawk surveying its territory. His spurs jangled with every step, a chilling reminder of his dominance. The sheriff's badge on his chest glinted in the sun but shone with no sense of justice, only authority given by fear. Those who wore badges alongside him were less protectors of the peace and more enforcers of his will, complicit in maintaining the brutal status quo. Yet beneath Pike's hardened exterior lay layers of ambition and desperation. A relic not just by age but by belief, he clung to an outdated notion that only strength could ensure order in a world teetering on chaos. He often recounted tales of how things used to be, how courage and swift judgment reigned supreme, but time had rendered such views obsolete. As Jesse Cole stepped deeper into this treacherous landscape, he felt Pike's looming shadow trailing behind him like a predator watching its prey. With each passing moment, Jesse sensed the stakes rising higher. Confronting Pike would mean unearthing not just truths about his brother, but also dismantling the very foundation upon which this town tottered, a task fraught with peril against such a relentless adversary. Jesse Cole rode into Hangman's Hollow as dusk settled over the town, the fading light casting long shadows that danced across the dusty street. His heart raced with a mixture of hope and trepidation, each thud echoing in time with the rhythmic clop of his horse's hooves. A young gunslinger, barely past his 20s, he carried the weight of determination on his shoulders, fueled by the singular purpose of locating his missing brother. Dressed in a weathered duster that flapped in the wind, Jesse cut a striking figure against the backdrop of decaying buildings. The revolver at his hip was more than just a weapon, it was an heirloom from his father. Its polished grip felt familiar and reassuring, a symbol of legacy and expectation. But as he looked around at the sullen faces peering through cracked windows and half-shuttered doors, he sensed an unsettling tension that told him something was very wrong. The townsfolk regarded this newcomer with wary eyes, their expressions betraying more than mere curiosity. In their glances lurked fear, fear of what Jesse might uncover and fear of the man who held power in this place, Marshal Pike. Oblivious to the full extent of Pike's tyranny, Jesse approached the nearest saloon, its wooden sign creaking ominously in the wind. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with smoke and murmurs, patrons huddled together like frightened animals. As Jesse stepped through the door, conversations hushed momentarily before resuming in low whispers. He could feel their gazes upon him, some intrigued by his youth and presence, while others seemed to view him as a potential threat to their unspoken pact of silence. Jesse approached the bar, leaning against it with an easy confidence that belied the uncertainty brewing inside him. "I'm looking for my brother," he stated simply. The bartender's face paled slightly at the mention of lost kin, but Jesse pressed on, unyielding. He pulled out the ledger from his coat, a collection of names that weighed heavily on him, and set it down before the barkeep. "I need answers," he said firmly. Little did he know that opening this door would lead him deeper into a dark labyrinth interwoven with Pike's ruthlessness. A world where truth was obscured by shadows and justice was a distant memory. Jesse leaned against the bar, the weight of uncertainty heavy on his shoulders as he awaited a response from the bartender. The murmurs around him faded into a backdrop of tension, but before he could press further, a figure emerged from the shadows of the saloon, a wiry man with a nervous demeanor and eyes that darted like frightened birds. He approached Jesse with cautious steps, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to pounce. "I heard you're looking for your brother," the man said in a low voice, his words laced with trepidation. "You might want to see this." He pulled a small, weathered ledger from beneath his tattered coat and held it out, hands trembling slightly. Jesse took it, his pulse quickening as he flipped through the brittle pages. The names scrawled across the yellowed paper sent chills down his spine, dozens of them, each one a testament to lives cut short by Pike's merciless hand. His heart sank as he spotted his brother's name nestled among the others, marked by an ominous date that seemed to mock his search. This was no mere list, it was a record of the fallen, a chilling catalog of Pike's extrajudicial hangings. "Where did you get this?" Jesse demanded, fighting back a surge of anger and despair. The man shrugged, clearly knowing better than to reveal too much. "Just watch yourself. Pike doesn't take kindly to folks stirring up trouble." Jesse's mind raced as he realized this ledger was the key to understanding not just his brother's fate, but also the broader darkness shrouding Hangman's Hollow. Each name represented a story untold, voices silenced before they could plead their cases in court. This wasn't just about finding his brother anymore, it was about justice for all those who had suffered at Pike's hands. With renewed determination, Jesse tucked the ledger close to his chest. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but he now possessed a weapon more potent than any revolver, a truth that could expose the depths of corruption in this town. As he stepped out of the saloon into the night air, he felt a fire ignite within him. He would not rest until every name in that ledger was honored and justice served, no matter what it cost him. With the ledger clutched tightly in his hands, Jesse Cole set out to gather information that could expose the truth hidden beneath Hangman's Hollow's rough exterior. The night air was thick with silence as he walked through the streets, shadows lurking in every corner, but his resolve only grew stronger. He knew that understanding this town's dark history required speaking to those who lived under its oppressive rule. His first stop was the general store, where a middle-aged woman perused the shelves filled with meager supplies. She paused when he entered, her eyes widening in surprise before a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "You're that new gunslinger," she said nervously. Jesse nodded, feeling the weight of expectation. "I'm looking for my brother and need to ask a few questions about Marshal Pike," he said directly, sensing her hesitation. The woman's demeanor instantly changed, her shoulders sagged, and she glanced toward the door as if gauging whether they were alone. "Pike doesn't take kindly to those digging around," she warned quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But if you have that ledger, you already know what he's capable of." Jesse leaned closer. I need to know more about these names, their stories. How is he able to keep doing this? Fear, she replied bluntly, glancing up nervously at the windows. People are too scared to speak against him even in private. They think it'll buy them time before Pike turns his gaze on them. Encouraged by her willingness to share, Jesse asked about specific names listed in the ledger. The woman's face paled further as she recounted tales of lost lives and families shattered by Pike's heinous actions. With each story, Jesse felt the past rise up around him like an impenetrable fog, each victim's tale deepening his thirst for justice. He spent the next few days moving stealthily through town, interviewing reluctant locals who shared pieces of their stories like shattered glass, each fragment revealing a conspiracy woven tightly through the fabric of Hangman's Hollow. An intricate web began to form in his mind. Prominent members of the community were revealed as collaborators in Pike's dark deeds. While fear kept many silent, Jesse discovered a knot of defiance simmering beneath the surface, a shared desire for change among those willing to fight back against tyranny. As he gathered this intelligence and began connecting dots that others feared to explore, Jesse realized he wasn't just searching for his brother anymore. He was piecing together a case for justice that could finally challenge Pike's cruel reign over Hangman's Hollow. Jesse Cole continued to weave through the dusty streets of Hangman's Hollow, his determination unyielded by the oppressive atmosphere. Each encounter brought him closer to the heart of the town's dark secrets, as he met a variety of townsfolk whose lives were forever marked by Pike's ruthless reign. His next stop was a dilapidated home at the edge of town, where an elderly couple tended their small garden, struggling against both age and despair. The woman, with her worn hands trembling slightly, recognized Jesse immediately. "You're looking for the truth, son," she said with a weary sigh as she pulled back from her work momentarily. "Just be careful, Pike's men have ears everywhere." Jesse listened intently as she recounted how her son had disappeared one night after standing up to Pike in defense of a friend wrongfully accused. "They took him without a trial," she murmured, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We've heard nothing since." Her husband nodded solemnly in agreement, reinforcing the grip of fear that choked their home like weeds. Next, he ventured into the local blacksmith shop, where the thrum of hammers striking metal echoed through the air. The blacksmith, a muscular man with calloused hands and haunted eyes, paused his work to meet Jesse's gaze. When asked about Pike's grip on the town, the smith leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "He uses our fears against us," he admitted grimly. "I lost brothers to that noose, falsely accused and never given a chance." The more stories he gathered, each punctuated with pain and loss, the more Jesse realized that this oppression ran deeper than he had anticipated. In each exchange, he noted that tokens of resistance existed. There were quiet nods among those willing to speak out, a shared understanding that perhaps they weren't alone in wanting change. One evening at dusk, Jesse met a group huddled around a fire outside another rundown establishment who whispered about rebellion against Pike's brutal ways. At first cautious to speak openly in such hostile conditions, they grew animated as they discovered Jesse was not just an outsider but someone determined to challenge their fate. With voices rising above murmurs of fear came aspirations for justice. Each story accumulated made it clear there was strength in unity against adversity. Jesse felt a fire ignite within him. These encounters turned mere investigation into a rallying cry for them all. The oppressed could rise together if only someone led them. Now armed with more than just a ledger and determination, Jesse began forming bonds with those ready to reclaim their fettered hearts from Pike's suffocating rule. Through them lay both his brother's story and every victim whose name was etched in pain on his mind. Together they could rewrite the tale of Hangman's Hollow and change its dark legacy forever. As Jesse Cole continued to rally the townsfolk against Marshal Pike's tyranny, tensions in Hangman's Hollow began to simmer dangerously. Whispers of rebellion circulated like wildfire, and it was only a matter of time before Pike's loyal enforcers took notice. Jesse was well aware that with every step he took toward exposing the truth, the risk of confrontation grew more imminent. One evening, as Jesse met with a small group of supporters in a secluded barn, the door swung open abruptly, and two of Pike's enforcers stormed in, their expressions hardened and menacing. "You're making quite a stir, gunslinger," one of them sneered, cracking his knuckles. "Pike doesn't take kindly to troublemakers." Jesse's heart raced, but he stood his ground, feeling the weight of the ledger tucked beneath his coat. "I'm not afraid of you or your boss," he replied defiantly. "I'm here for justice, and I won't back down." The enforcers exchanged glances before lunging forward, eager to silence him. In an instant, Jesse's instincts kicked in. He spun sideways, drawing his father's old revolver with practiced precision. The gun felt familiar in his hand as he aimed it squarely at the first enforcer who charged. "Back off," Jesse shouted, his voice steady even as adrenaline coursed through him. The room fell silent, tension hanging thick in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. The enforcers hesitated, their bravado wavering in the face of Jesse's determination. "Think you're a hero," the second enforcer barked, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're just another fool looking for trouble." But Jesse wasn't just another fool. He was fueled by the stories he had heard of lost lives and crushed hopes, and he refused to let fear dictate his actions any longer. "No," he replied fiercely, "I'm here to bring change." The standoff stretched on, both sides locked in a battle of wills. Jesse could see the doubt creeping into the enforcers' eyes. They were accustomed to intimidation, not resistance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they began to back away slowly. "Pike will hear about this," one threatened as they retreated. "Let him," Jesse shot back, his resolve solidified by this confrontation. As they vanished into the night, he turned to face his friends in the barn. The fear that had once permeated their discussions began to dissipate, replaced by a shared sense of empowerment. In that moment, Jesse knew that confronting Pike would not just be about seeking vengeance for his brother or the countless others who had suffered. It was about igniting a fire of hope within Hangman's Hollow, a fire that could not be easily extinguished by fear or oppression. Together with these townsfolk, he would fight for their right to live without terror looming over them, a fight worth risking everything for. The more Jesse dug into the dark underbelly of Hangman's Hollow, the clearer it became that Marshal Pike was not acting alone. His inquiries began to reveal a network of influential figures who benefited from the fear and chaos that the Marshal instilled in the town. As he pieced together snippets of conversations and whispered confessions, a grim realization took shape. Pike's brutality was part of a larger scheme that integrated key players within the community. One afternoon, while speaking with an old man who had once run a tavern, Jesse learned about backroom deals and clandestine meetings that linked Pike to some of the town's wealthiest merchants. "They turn a blind eye to his actions because they profit from his cruelty," the man said, voice trembling with frustration. "Pike keeps order for them, they sell their goods while he handles any dissent." Jesse felt a surge of anger as he listened, his heart racing at the implications. If these men were complicit in Pike's injustices, then exposing this conspiracy would be even more dangerous than he anticipated. It wasn't just about saving his brother or seeking retribution. It was about dismantling a corrupt system that had crippled Hangman's Hollow for too long. He pressed on, seeking out connections and patterns until one name surfaced repeatedly: Henry Caldwell, one of the most affluent landowners in town. Whispers indicated that Caldwell had been seen attending private gatherings at the sheriff's office, discussions likely laced with schemes pertaining to land acquisitions and silencing dissenters. Jesse knew that confronting Caldwell could bring him closer to unraveling the truth behind Pike's power. Under cover of darkness, Jesse stealthily approached Caldwell's estate, observing shadowy figures moving about inside, the signs of yet another meeting fueling his resolve. He slipped around to a side window and listened intently as voices drifted through the glass. The conversation revealed plots thicker than blood, plans to tighten their grip on control by reinforcing support for Pike and eliminating anyone who dared challenge them. Feeling invigorated yet cautious, Jesse retreated quietly but vowed to share what he learned with his growing coalition of townsfolk resistant to Pike's rule. Their movement was no longer just about personal grievances. It was now tied to justice for all those wronged by an oppressive regime supported by greed and terror. With each new piece of information gathered, Jesse became increasingly aware that their fight would require careful strategy. Public resistance against fear-mongering tyrants needed unity and courage. Together with his allies, Jesse knew they could build something stronger than tyranny, a vision for justice that transcended individual pain and embraced collective strength. The truth was emerging like dawn across Hangman's Hollow. Jesse Cole was determined to make it shine bright enough to dispel the shadows forever. As Jesse delved deeper into the suffering and injustices inflicted by Marshal Pike, he found himself grappling with a profound moral dilemma. Each story shared with him was a fresh wound, reminding Jesse of his own brother's fate. The pain etched on the faces of the townsfolk weighed heavily on his heart, pushing him dangerously close to the precipice of vengeance. In the quiet moments between gatherings and planning sessions, Jesse would sit alone and reflect on what exact form justice should take. While he felt a visceral urge to exact revenge on Pike for all the wrongs committed, he was acutely aware that giving in to that anger could lead him down the same dark path of tyranny that had ensnared Marshal Pike. The thought haunted him. Was he destined to become like the very monster he sought to defeat? One evening, as he looked over the ledger filled with names and heart-wrenching stories, Jesse recalled a conversation with an elderly man whose son had been one of Pike's victims. "Revenge will only breed more hatred," the man had said softly but firmly. "What we need is not another cycle of violence but truth, the kind that can heal." Those words resonated within Jesse, intensifying his internal battle. With each encounter with those affected by Pike's brutality, Jesse's empathy grew stronger. He could almost see their unmet hopes reflected in their eyes. They yearned for justice but feared the price it demanded. Striking back against Pike might bring immediate satisfaction but potentially condemn others in a way that would perpetuate fear in their lives. Jesse realized he faced a pivotal choice: succumb to vengeful instincts or channel his rage toward dismantling Pike's oppressive system in a manner that shifted the power back to the people, without replicating the cycle of violence that held Hangman's Hollow in its grasp. The nights grew longer as he pondered this critical decision, weighing revenge against justice forged through truth-telling and unification. He envisioned how liberating it would feel to expose the corruption and conspiracies intertwined within Pike's circle while remaining true to his moral compass. As dawn broke over Hangman's Hollow, illuminating a town gripped by both fear and hope, Jesse knew he needed to share this realization with his allies. Together, they would not merely seek retaliation. They would stand firm for genuine justice, not just restoration for one but liberation for all caught under the thumb of the tyrant who had wreaked havoc for far too long. It was time to rally them around a vision that transcended personal vendettas, a fight for truth that could ultimately pave their path to lasting change. The tension in Hangman's Hollow reached a boiling point as Jesse Cole prepared for the inevitable showdown with Marshal Pike. The townsfolk had gathered, their faces a mixture of fear and anticipation, awaiting a confrontation that would determine not only Jesse's fate but also the future of their oppressed community. With the ledger of names tucked securely under his arm and his father's old revolver holstered at his side, Jesse steeled himself for what lay ahead. As night engulfed the town, Jesse made his way to the center where Pike was known to hold court. The air crackled with energy as people murmured about the impending clash. They knew that confronting Pike could mean their lives, but understood that enduring his tyranny was no longer an option. Jesse stepped forward, heart-pounding, and faced the imposing figure of Marshal Pike. "Cole," Pike drawled, a sinister grin spreading across his face as he regarded Jesse. "You really think you can challenge me? You're just a boy playing gunslinger." The marshal's voice dripped with condescension, yet there was a flicker of uncertainty in his cold eyes. Jesse's grip tightened on the revolver as he took a deep breath. "I'm not here to play games, Pike. I'm here to expose you for what you really are, a coward hiding behind your noose." The crowd shifted uneasily at his words. They felt the weight of truth hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. "You've taken too many innocent lives," Jesse continued fiercely, "and I'm not going to let that continue unchallenged." Pike's expression darkened as he stepped closer, looming over Jesse like a predator circling its prey. "Do you really believe these folks will back you?" he sneered. "They fear me for good reason." In that moment, Jesse's resolve hardened. He turned to face the townspeople who had rallied behind him, their eyes reflecting both fear and defiance. "Look around you. This is what we've become under his rule, paralyzed by fear." His voice rang out clear and strong. With every word, more townsfolk began to step forward in solidarity. "We won't be cowed by this tyrant any longer," shouted one man who had lost his brother to Pike's noose. In an instant, Pike realized he was no longer just facing Jesse. He was confronting a united front that threatened to dismantle everything he had built on oppression and violence. Fury ignited within him as he drew his weapon, but before he could make a move, Jesse raised his revolver defiantly. "Stop!" shouted Jesse, echoing through the hushed crowd. "I choose truth over vengeance, but know this, I'll fight for justice until my last breath." The air hung thick with tension as they stood poised on the brink of chaos, a standoff that would either lead to liberation or further suffering for Hangman's Hollow. In those moments filled with urgency and perilous uncertainty, truths began to unravel. Whether it would culminate in bloodshed or spark an awakening remained to be seen. But one thing was certain, this time justice would not be silenced. The aftermath of the confrontation in Hangman's Hollow left a mark on both Jesse Cole and the town he had come to fight for. With Pike's reign of terror finally challenged, the air was thick with uncertainty and hope. As the dust settled from the violent standoff, Jesse stood amidst a crowd that had gathered, their faces reflecting a mix of fear and exhilaration. It was a moment that would reshape their community. News of Pike's fall spread quickly, igniting a flicker of courage in the hearts of many who had long been silenced. But alongside this newfound determination lay the haunting memories of those lost to the noose and the system that had protected Pike's cruelty. Jesse felt the burden of leadership heavy upon him. While he had fought valiantly, he knew that changing minds would require far more than bravery in battle. In the days that followed, Jesse worked tirelessly alongside the townsfolk. They gathered not only to mourn but also to reflect on their collective past, a history marked by oppression and suffering. The communal grief began to transform into a shared commitment to rebuilding their town. Jesse held meetings in the evenings where stories flowed freely like whiskey, each tale of loss adding weight to their resolve for justice. Jesse also realized that his ledger of victims served as more than just a list. It became a powerful symbol of their fight against tyranny. He proposed creating a memorial for those lost under Pike's regime, a place where their stories would be etched for generations to remember. The townsfolk agreed with enthusiasm, eager to honor their friends and family while forging a stronger bond among themselves. Yet Jesse couldn't shake his inner turmoil. The memories of the confrontation lingered like ghosts at the edge of his thoughts. Was he truly better than Pike? In fighting for justice and unity, he feared he might inadvertently create another cycle of retribution if not careful. With each passing day, he remained vigilant, determined to guide Hangman's Hollow toward healing without repeating past mistakes. As weeks turned into months, Jesse watched as hope bloomed where desperation once thrived. The townsfolk began forming new alliances based on transparency and collaboration. They were no longer willing to accept silence as a means of survival. For every soul lost to injustice, many more emerged ready to build a future defined by empowerment rather than fear. In this pivotal moment, Jesse recognized that true justice meant holding onto their humanity even amid darkness. By choosing compassion over retaliation, they could forge a future where everyone had a voice, a future that would chase away shadows with light and truth. With this steadfast belief guiding him, Jesse Cole stood ready to embrace both challenges and triumphs as he led Hangman's Hollow into an era reborn from its ashes. As Jesse Cole stood in the heart of Hangman's Hollow, he reflected on the tumultuous journey that had brought him to this pivotal moment. The dust had settled from the confrontation with Marshal Pike, and while a sense of relief permeated the air, it was laced with uncertainty. The town was no longer under the shadow of tyranny, but the scars left by Pike's brutal regime ran deep, and Jesse knew that true healing would be a long and arduous process. In quiet moments, he often found himself pondering what justice truly meant in a world so marred by lawlessness. The ledger of names he carried was more than just a record of victims. It was a reminder of the lives lost and the stories silenced. Jesse understood that while exposing Pike's corruption was a significant step toward justice, it would not erase the pain felt by families torn apart or restore the lives extinguished too soon. He considered the words of the elderly man who had once told him that revenge only breeds more hatred. Jesse felt a pang of conflict within himself. While he had fought valiantly against Pike, he feared that any thirst for vengeance could lead him down a path similar to that of his oppressor. Would he become another tyrant if he allowed anger to dictate his actions? This introspection weighed heavily on his heart as he sought to forge a new identity for both himself and the town. Engaging with the townsfolk, Jesse encouraged open discussions about their past and dreams for future unity. He recognized that true justice was not merely about dismantling oppressive systems, but also about fostering compassion and understanding among those who had suffered together. In supporting one another through shared grief and hope, they could construct a community built on solidarity rather than fear. Weeks turned into months, and Jesse witnessed gradual change unfold before his eyes. The townspeople began to reclaim their voices, engaging in dialogues about their rights and responsibilities as citizens of Hangman's Hollow. With each passing day, they embraced a vision of justice intertwined with empathy, a commitment to ensure that no one would face oppression alone again. As Jesse looked out over the town during sunset, bathed in warm hues of orange and gold, he felt a sense of peace begin to bloom within him. He understood now that justice was not just an endpoint but a continual journey, a promise to honor those lost while striving to create a brighter future for all. With this newfound clarity guiding him, Jesse Cole stood ready to lead Hangman's Hollow into an era defined not by its past, but by its collective resilience and unwavering pursuit of truth.